Hi, my name is Carrie Garza, and I'm going to present on arts-based research. Now, I have to be honest, when we were choosing which one we would study, arts-based was not the one I would have chosen. I got in there a little late to choose, and so arts-based was what was left. I had no schema, I had no idea what arts-based research was. However, as I have researched this myself and looked into it, it's really interesting, and I'm looking forward to sharing this with you. And I would guess that you probably haven't heard of it either. So the philosophical underpinnings that it's grounded in constructivist paradigms. And it has a few claims that reality is socially constructed and it's shaped by lived experiences. Even that part about lived experiences is really interesting to me because that is a piece that regular data can't capture. The reality includes emotions and dimensions, and it can be felt, sensed, embodied, and is relational. And that meaning is layered, and it can be ambiguous. Those three bullets, the reality is socially constructed, reality includes emotions and dimensions, and that meaning is layered. As I began to really look into what this meant, those three bullets are truly the three that captivated me and really made me want to look deeper into what this is. So for the connections, again, most of you have probably never really heard about this. Arts-based research is centered around views that reality is socially constructed, emotionally experienced, and contextually based. I love that point because that is a piece that lots of typical research methods don't take into account. Because if you've ever worked with people, and if you've worked with children or humans, and if you've ever led a team, you know that we can all be sitting in one meeting with the same snacks, the same drinks, the same presentation, but we all walk away with a different interpretation of what was said. And that's because most of us are very intrinsically centered. We think about how it will impact us. For example, if you're sitting in a meeting and the boss says, if you don't want to be here, you should just leave. Well, that probably has nothing to do with you, but you may have thought back a conversation that you had 4 days ago with your boss, and you talked about how you might consider exploring other options one day. But we automatically associate that with what we said. And so what I love about arts-based research is it takes all of those kinds of things into account when looking at the data. Early pioneers such as Barone and Eisner argued that artistic forms could reveal dimensions of human experience that typical forms of research could not. And again, that piece of human experience really excites me. The data collection and analysis. Arts-based research incorporates multimodal data collection and analysis by integrating artistic processes into one or more phase of the research design process. So what does that mean, right? Well, participants may draw, they might write a poem, they might participate in a performance or write a play. They might write a song. Any type of artistic expression counts as arts-based research. This is another one of those pieces that as I began to look more into what this was, also became exciting. Because this is a piece that data, numbers, interview questions, it just won't capture. Because we all know as the human heart is designed, some things can't be put into numbers and some things definitely can't be set into a traditional narrative of words. But if we are given the time and the space, to tap into artistic abilities and view it through that lens, what is produced is very different. So the purpose is not only to unveil findings as in a typical research. So for example, if I were to study the impacts of COVID-19 on ninth graders in Algebra 1, right? I'm going to get some data. I'll have some pretty good data. I can look at their data pre-COVID. I can look at their data post-COVID. I can identify some patterns within that. But what I'm not going to find by looking at that data set is that last piece of that sentence to evoke deep meaning and understanding. I would just be looking through the realm of some numbers and not through human emotion. So the purpose is to identify the need to collectively study the aesthetic beyond words. And I love that piece, beyond the words. So to truly help you understand this, because if you're like me, you had never heard of this, and it was definitely not something you had ever considered, I'm going to talk about an example study. So this example study was to explore the collective lived experiences of individuals during the COVID-19 pandemic. Now, I had just talked about how we could measure the impact of COVID-19 through ninth graders' Algebra 1 data. But this is going to be different. This will seek to demonstrate how artistic expression should capture the emotional, relational, and social complexities of the global crisis in ways that the traditional research methods might miss, such as if we were just to look at data. Because remember that first bullet, the purpose of this study was to explore the collective lived experiences. So what they did, Gerber and his colleagues, they sought out participants from multiple countries to create an artistic response, such as poetry and visual art, that reflected the pandemic experiences. They then used that information to analyze and identify themes, but they also had to be careful to preserve the expressive integrity of the work. This is a beautiful bullet. The study focused on collective meaning instead of individual case studies. The human experience, the collective meaning. Some of the themes that they unveiled were uncertainty, fear, grief, isolation, resilience, and hope. And again, what I loved about this is it wasn't through one person, it was through a collective meaning. So there were some implications, right? So the study argues that arts-based research approaches are valuable for examining global, complex issues. It was able to humanize a large-scale event. It captured emotional realities and also supported cross-cultural understanding. This is a piece that could not have been done through a data set. So when we're talking about arts-based research in general, there are some challenges that happen. One of them is skepticism. Some view arts-based research as less systematic and it can be subjective. They also argue that there could be multiple interpretations. Because of that, the researcher must function as an analyst, an ethical steward, and artistic interpretation. So you would have to be careful if you were studying something through art that you might have also gone through. Because what you don't want to do is put your personal interpretation into that of the participant. I've included a few must-reads. If you'd like to read the study specifically that I mentioned in the case study, it is on the last bullet there about sustaining life on Earth. I really hope that you take some time to truly delve into arts-based research. Again, I had no idea what it was. I'd never even heard of it. But what it does do is allow the researcher to truly explore a human experience. Data is valuable. Data has a very important part in the world of research, but we're also humans. And just like this slide talked about, the purpose is to not only unveil findings, but to evoke deep meaning and understanding. And really, as researchers, this should be our goal. We should always be digging to find the deep meaning and understanding. Research should never be surface level. It should never just to spit out an article or create some findings, because behind that data set are humans that have the lived experiences. So if you have some time or you're interested, research arts-based research. I think about our students in the performing arts in the high school that I work in. I think about our students in band. And while some of them perform really well academically, not all of them do. Some of those students, if I were to use them as a participant in a research study, might show that they have deficits. However, in an arts-based research, if I allowed them to use music to do what this purpose is, to unveil some kind of findings, I would most likely be able to dig deeper into who they are and to interpret what they've gone through to help further my study. Thank you so much for joining this presentation, and I hope you look more into arts-based research.